Today on Tag, I'm going to be talking about guns with actor Sean Maguire. Sean grew up in the UK. He's going to tell us about his experiences there with the gun issue and then the differences between the UK and the United States. Sean Maguire, great actor, coming up on Tag. Welcome to Tag. I'm Matt Littman, Executive Director of 97%. I'm talking about guns today with Sean Maguire, an outspoken advocate, an actor who my family knows from Once Upon a Time. We've seen all of them, Sean, and there are like 7. How many seasons were there of Once Upon a Time?
I think there was 7, I think.
7 seasons.
Yeah.
You also did The Magicians, EastEnders. That was very popular. Timeless, Meet the Spartans. You have your own online acting studio.
That's correct, yeah.
When did you start that?
During the sort of early days of the pandemic, my parents are both teachers, and 4 out of my 5 siblings are all teachers. So it's very much in the family DNA. And you know, my brother who lives in Arizona, he flips between Arizona and Texas, and he was teaching Irish dancing, which is what a lot of them teach over Zoom. And I thought, oh, that can be done over Zoom. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'll give because I've been wanting to get a class together for a long time. A lot of young people and sometimes people my age and older have said, oh, I'd love to do it. How do I get into it? And it's such a difficult question to answer. And I thought, you know, maybe I could just start up a little class, just one class, and help people just learn the fundamentals and the basics and teach them about how one goes about getting an agent and building a show reel and all of those things. And you know, before we knew it, we had sort of 5 classes and students from 30 countries around the world. And we started up a friend of mine who's a novelist, started a creative writing course, and soon we'll have a director's course and stuff. So it's trying to make what seems to be impossible just more accessible, to give people that entryway into getting their start in the business, basically.
Fantastic. So you managed to find time to act, to have your own studio where you're teaching people how to act. You're also involved in a bunch of different causes, lots of them, like climate and guns, obviously. Now, how did you get involved in the gun issue? Why is that such an important issue to you?
You know, it's funny, I knew that I was coming on today. I started thinking about back when, and as I said, my folks are here, and my mum said, oh gosh, I remember when you went to Dunblane. Now, a lot of people in America may not be aware of the Dunblane tragedy, but when I was about 18 or 19, and I was a pop star at the time, believe it or not. So I was kind of here, there, and everywhere. I had a record deal with Parlophone, and I was doing concerts and stuff. And then, you know, it doesn't happen very often in England because we don't have guns per se. I mean, we have them, but at the in a very limited amount of people's hands. And a man called Michael Ryan went into a school in Scotland and a bit like our Sandy Hook tragedy, just killed a bunch of people. In fact, a young Andy Murray, the tennis player, was actually in the school. And I met a young Andy Murray. And so I went up and met some of the families after the tragedy. And, you know, we had to be pulled aside by counsellors to explain some of the protocols about what we can and shouldn't say and stuff. But I remember at the age of 18 or 19, sort of just not being fully able to get my head around the enormity of the tragedy. And, you know, it was a profound thing that really, really stayed with me. Of course, at that time, I didn't know I was going to move to America, and I didn't know that the gun issue was going to become something that became so important to me. But so that was the sort of the initial sort of awakening of, oh my gosh, this is something that and luckily I don't think we've ever had anything quite like that in the UK since. But when I moved to America, my dear friend and brother Jason George, who you know well, is just one of those guys that I look up to enormously, and he was, you know, involved, and because we're very close, he's godfather to one of my sons, and Van, his wife, is godmother, and so, you know, I sort of follow Jason's lead a little bit, and he was like, you know, you're passionate, you're us, but you should come and do this. And I was like, yes, I should. And this was all before I had children, and now obviously I have 3 children, and like any parent, my absolute worst nightmare is that phone call, you know, that something has happened. And right. So rather than just go, oh, well, it's America, what are you going to do? I just sort of feel like in whatever tiny, small way I could use my platform or my very small amount of celebrity to try to affect meaningful change, I wanted to do that. I wanted to just sort of, you know, put my money where my mouth is and try to just to be of service to getting us where we should be, which is not trying to take all of the guns away from America. I know that's never going to happen, but to have some meaningful gun reform where where it's not easier to get a AK-47 than it is to sign into Apple. Do you know what I mean? I just don't understand. And it's not. I'm not criticizing Pacific. I just don't understand the congressmen and the senators who see tragedy after tragedy and go, nah, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, do something. We've amended the Constitution 166 times. I think we can do something. So I just feel like, along with people like yourself, I just want to try to see if we can make this better and reduce the level of deaths in this country, and God forbid another school shooting where we see infants being carried out.
Do you, given your experience in Europe and then here, do you find that there's a difference in what we accept in the United States in terms of death and violence versus other countries?
Yes, I do. I think that somewhere in the messaging, somebody has sort of equated these awful, abhorrent tragedies to, well, that's the price of our freedom. And I'm like, but you realize we all have freedom in Europe, and we have freedom everywhere else. We don't sort of go, well, I mean, when something significant happens, normally enormous change follows it. But yet we see it again and again and again. And the right will say, well, that's just the way things are. And I refuse to accept that. And the thing is, not to sound too cynical, but when I see someone like Marco Rubio getting $5 million in his coffers from the NRA and other congressmen and senators, this is clearly about the money that they get. Because if you can imagine, I mean, you and I both know Fred Guttenberg, an extraordinary man who's turned his absolute tragedy into something so proactive. I have so much respect and love for him for what he's doing. But I don't want there to be any more Fred Guttenbergs in terms of having to do this. So I just feel that this is something that we can do something about, and it can only change if enough of us stand up and say we must make it very difficult for people with who are in a mentally unstable position to be able to get hold of not just firearms but military style machine guns that I just don't understand. Nobody's yet, as we said just off camera, I've not heard anybody explain to me, I understand the right to bear arms, I understand the Second Amendment, but why do you need a machine gun? Well, I'm a hunter. What are you hunting? A T-Rex? Why do you need Magnum stock guns? Because they're only designed to kill as many people in a short period of time. So
I'm going to push back on you on one thing, though, Sean, which is that the NRA gives money to candidates, right? But there are millions of people in the NRA.
Yes.
And so the legislators, there are a majority of legislators in Congress favor gun reforms now, right? Favor universal background checks. That's passed the House. The Senate needs 60 votes, but there are more than 50 for universal background checks. So a majority do, but less than the NRA's money, because there's more money coming from pro-gun reform groups than from the NRA, is the fact that people disagree. And in some states, they don't feel the same way as they do in other states. And the way that Congress is set up is that the states that have a very small population often have as much of a say as states that are much larger. So I would just disagree a bit, Sean, in that I find it's less about the money than it is about the number of people that are supportive of those organizations and people disagreeing. And the benefit of somebody like you favoring something like universal background checks is you're able to explain it very beautifully and very simply to people who mostly already believe in what you're saying. They just don't speak out about it enough.
Well, again, like I'm using the NRA as an example because I remember after that tragic school shooting, the student saying, "Will you stop?" to Rubio, "Will you stop taking contributions?" And he was like, "No." So that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's many more. There's way more to this. It's way more complex. But again, you maybe can educate me. I don't understand how you can be a congressman. We're not saying, we're going to take everything away from you. That's it. The party's over, gun owners. We're not saying that. I'm just saying, let me preface it by this. if you go speak to the grieving parents of a child who's been shot, and then you say to them, now let me explain to you why I need that machine gun, I find that argument falls rather thinly. And so I know that this is a complex issue, and I don't pretend to understand all the nuances of it, but I think we're talking, at its core, we're talking about things that are basic common sense. You know, nobody challenges the fact that, well, why can't I get in the car blind drunk and drive down the freeway? Nobody says that. You're like, well, because you might kill somebody. And so it's that thing. People say, well, if you've got a gun, you might as well ban cars. Well, a car is not designed to kill somebody. A machine gun is really designed to do pretty much that. And so I understand the nuance. I understand that there's pushback. And I'm willing to listen and to be educated by the people that have an opposing point of view of mine. But like I said, you know, all of it is conversation, all of it is debate until you see a coffin this big. And then I think that the nature of the conversation changes. And I certainly don't want that for me. I don't want it for anybody I love. I don't want it for anybody in the United States. So I just feel that there is a conversation and a debate to be had where we can find some compromise. Do you know what I mean? And I'm willing to sit down and listen to the other side and have them educate me on their point of view, because I'm, you know, I feel pretty passionately about mine.
Well, you know, what's interesting, Sean, is nobody favors 90% of anything in this country, but they favor universal background checks, and we don't have it, right? And so that's the common ground that exists right now is there.
And we have the NRA, aren't the NRA members sort of like 81% of them or something like that favor just it's like saying, do you favor having a fire door in a theater? You're like, well, I don't think we need that door. So, well, of course we do, in case there's a fire. I think most gun owners in this country are sensible people and are responsible people. But we know it only takes one out of, say, 10,000 people who's having a bad day, has bad mental health, has a number of issues that are going on, and we get a Sandy Hook, or we get a positive club or something.
Yeah, but you're right. You know, we just did a study with Beacon Research, Sean, where it showed that a vast majority of gun owners, 84% of gun owners, for example, favor background checks, right? So, you know, it does seem absolutely bonkers that we don't have something like background checks when you have those numbers that favor background checks, right? So other issues.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I don't understand. Our body politics, you know, the will of the people is overwhelmingly strong. Most of us, I'd say nearly all of us, do not want to see another tragedy. A lot of us, but I don't want to see another tragedy, but I'd like to be able to protect my homestead, as is my constitutional right. So I fully respect that. I fully understand that. But it's just like everything else. We have safety protocols on airplanes. We wear seatbelts. We don't drink and drive. You know, these are things that all of us with any common sense would agree with. So I just don't understand why our system of checks and balances is letting us down so badly on this one issue. And this one issue is, it's not just a one-off, is it? I mean, let's be honest. You know, during the pandemic, obviously it slowed down because most of us are at home. There isn't everybody out walking around. So it has slowed down. But I'm fairly sure, as I'm sure you are, that once we get past the pandemic, unfortunately, this thing is going to come back, roaring back, you know, because, you know, if you know your history, you know where you're going. And unfortunately, our history tells us this is not going to go away unless we do something about it.
No, the number of deaths with guns increases every year. And 2/3 of those are suicides, right? And so one of the reasons we talk a lot about background checks or red flag laws is because if you slow down that process, you're going to have less deaths. You're going to have less suicides.
Yeah.
You know, more than any other issues, this is where people agree. So that's where we try to focus. You know, assault weapons ban, which is kind of what you're talking about a bit, is really only favored by just over 50% of the country. And part of the reason, Sean, is the difficulty in defining what type of weapon that is. Different people disagree about what the definition is. However, a vast majority of the country agrees on background checks. Your wife was in law enforcement, or is?
Yes, she was a detective with New Scotland Yard.
Oh, and did she, from her experience, did that impact your view on guns at all?
Well, yeah. Well, coincidentally, my wife she rose up the ranks very quickly because she's very smart. And one of the biggest cases that she worked on, her and her team actually have the historic, the largest gun running ring in the Metropolitan Police's history. She put about 45 people, her and her team put about 45 people that were making, modifying, starting pistols, doing sort of modifications and basically getting guns onto our streets in London. She put, her and her team put about 45 of those people behind bars. So I'm very, very proud of it.
Wow.
So yeah, it's an issue. She has friends in our version of SWAT. Some of her female friends are in the British SWAT team. So it's something that we've talked about and listened to and learned a bit on either side of the Atlantic. And obviously, I would say, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're so lucky in England. I said, but if we had the constitutional right that everybody in England had guns, you can guarantee we would have the exact same problem as the United States. We're very, very similar. As I said earlier, we're a country separated by a common language. I mean, our knife crime is through the roof in London. And that really speaks to the fact that we have no problems with killing, no problem with gangs and stabbing and stuff. If they could get hold of guns, they would. So I thank the Lord that we don't have a constitutional amendment that allows people to bear arms, because we would be having so many more deaths, so many more frequently in London.
Yeah. Sean, I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick questions. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to tell me see if you can remember this, and there's a reason I'm asking this one. In the show Timeless, you play Ian Fleming, and in a scene where you're cornered by Albert Speer, you say what when he commands his men to move you to the study?
Oh God, I don't know, because I only saw it once when it aired. But I think it was in German. Because I was speaking German, and for those who don't speak German, it's a rather tough language to learn rather quickly. But
how many languages do you speak?
One, really. I mean, I speak a little bit of French, I speak a little bit of Spanish, and now I understood a little bit of German. But something, eine der Rocken, something like that, which was, I have a gun in your back, or I think, but I don't know. It's been about 10 years.
I picked this question because shouldn't you be, Ian Fleming wrote James Bond, right?
Correct, yes.
Shouldn't you be playing James Bond? Shouldn't you be the next James Bond?
Do you know, I was watching a little bit of No Time to Die yesterday, and I was just like, oh, what I'd give. But to be honest, I thought Daniel Craig was so good. I was saying to my dad, good luck whoever follows that guy, because I would not want to fill his shoes. But yeah, I think of all the roles, I would love to play Alexander Hamilton on stage. But I think Lynn quite rightly is giving that to people, non-white people, which I actually thoroughly agree with. But yeah, I mean, if I had one dream that I could, one role I could play, what boy doesn't grow up to be James?
Me too. But
Ian Fleming was, it felt like, because they wrote him kind of Bond-ish, and I had a secret gun, and I spoke German just as a Nazi. So I literally said to the producers, they're like, "You having fun?" I said, "This is literally like being at fantasy camp for me. I'm just having." I would have paid you to do the job, which I shouldn't really say. My agents reminded me, but no, I had so much fun doing that. Probably one of the most fun I've had on a job.
At the end of each one of these, we ask somebody to tag another person who they think should be on. You can't tag Jason George because he already did it, and he tagged you.
That's right.
So who do you think would be a good person for us to have on? Who would you recommend?
Well, my wife, if she, because as I said, she's a lot smarter than me, and she actually has some experience about putting some of these guys behind bars. So I would nominate my wife.
Perfect. Okay.
Maybe she can give you more insight into what it's like to be a police officer on the ground in London and dealing with these issues.
100%. We're gonna do that. Sean, thank you for doing this. You're a great advocate on a bunch of issues, including this. So much appreciated.
And no, thank you for what you're doing, and I really hope that through these things and all of the other things that you guys do, that we can actually. It would be just so wonderful within the next few years to see some meaningful change and actually see those numbers begin to fall, because this is a fight worth fighting for, I think.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for joining us today on TAG.
Thank you, Matt.